Examinations in the times of a pandemic is testing times for the students, their family members, lakhs and lakhs of lives at stake. But the government says that life must go on, examinations must go on. To discuss this in great detail, we have a Congress MP, Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Dr. Tharoor, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure you must have seen the Twitter hashtag that these examinations must be postponed. Obviously, you can't brush away the concern that the students have, their family has, despite the fact that they've not got much support in the Supreme Court. What do you think, is it right or wrong on their part to be expressing these concerns?
I think they're totally justified. In fact, Sanket, I've actually been tagged on many of these requests for more than a couple of weeks now. Many of the students have reached out to me. I had actually taken up a similar issue in Kerala, and I'd even called the chief minister there on that occasion. And on one matter, the examinations for the Kerala Technological University, he very kindly agreed to postpone them. But unfortunately, there is a thing called the KEAM, the Kerala Engineering Examinations, which are similar to the JEE, and they went ahead with them, creating a disaster. First of all, social distancing is very difficult to maintain in a country where our numbers in relation to the availability of exam centers are so few. Secondly, these are young kids just passing out of class 12. Parents will be bound to accompany them. There was inevitably huge crowding outside the centers. And as a result, a number of students who took the KEAM examinations ended up getting COVID. Now, it's actually a factual thing. It's out there on the record. And I pointed out that if only they had listened to our request to postpone the exams, we could have avoided a major horror. Now, what we're looking at with NEET JEE is a much larger catchment pool. You're talking about 26 lakh students, probably, who would have to take these examinations. Many are not anywhere near their centers because during the lockdown, they've gone home or they're with their families. Very many of them are in positions where it's not convenient for them to come back. Many have not been able to study in the normal way because of the artificial circumstances of the lockdown, the unavailability of materials, etc. In all of these circumstances, these are far from being the ideal circumstances to take the examinations. And as a result, these are actually not going to be an accurate gauge anymore of the talent, academic capability, or even the sort of state of mind of our young people who are sitting for these crucial life-changing examinations. I think it's a very unfortunate thing that the government has decided to go ahead with it. They're, of course, being ruled by the academic calendar and the convenience of the system.
I wanted to ask you this question, Dr. Tharoor. The government on its part says, and people who actually advocate for these examinations say, you can't waste an academic year. I want to ask from you, what could be the alternative, the solution?
Well, certainly a postponement. You see, the problem is that these exams have already been postponed once, Sanket, and they've been postponed when the numbers of people infected and the level of danger in the country was actually much less. So things were so bad that you couldn't actually hold the examinations with lower numbers of COVID sufferers. How is it you're going ahead when the situation is much worse in the country today? It doesn't really make any logical sense. There are two possibilities. One is to hope that COVID will pass and reschedule the examinations, let's say 2 months from now, say after Diwali, and see whether, as a result, there's a possibility that we can go ahead by then if the curve has begun to flatten. If it hasn't, we'll have to postpone them again, undoubtedly. And you'll have to telescope some of the later processes, which will put a greater onus on the administration, the invigilators, the teachers, the graders, etc. The second possibility, if all of this is not possible and COVID continues to get worse, is to create an examination that can be done at home. And for those who do not have online facilities at home, to designate a certain number of online centers where they can go, but the majority will take it at home, so you won't have all the problems of crowding and everything else. And even then, it will not be a perfect situation. And obviously, it will not test the memory capacity of the students anymore because they will be able to refer to materials that they're doing it at home. But then you ask your questions in such a way that you see other skills, synthesizing skills, problem-solving skills, the approach of the student more than what particular facts they're able to come up with. And I think these two options have to be explored very seriously during the period of the first postponement. So we postpone, let's say, till November. And meanwhile, you prepare a home examination. In November, COVID is still bad and you can't do that examination in November, announce immediately a home examination. I think that's the only rational way to proceed. I did tag Dr. Jitendra Singh on this. I hope that as Minister for Personnel, he's going to look at all of this. I certainly hope that the government will take an interest, because obviously many people are writing desperate letters to the Prime Minister and so on, Education Minister.
No, Dr. Tharoor, see, I think the first point that you made, that obviously how will a person or a student be in a right frame of mind to appear for an examination with a crisis like this? I want to ask you, do you think what is your assessment? Do you think that the government has not ideated enough, not thought or experimented enough or toyed with the various different possibilities around conducting these examinations? We need exams, yes.
I get the impression they've actually toyed with no other alternative. All they've done is we either have to hold the examination or we postpone it a bit and then we have to hold it again. They have not examined the possibility of a radical rethinking. And I do not believe that they have actually sat down with professors of engineering, with teachers, and say, listen, how can we avoid dragging kids to exam centers and still have a way of evaluating their aptitude for engineering? It still would not be a perfect result. Some kids will unfortunately unjustly miss out because of the situation. But at least it would be better than subjecting them to the rigors of an examination where there will be other disadvantages. So those who have been relatively well off, those who live close to their university campuses, those who have access to online materials, their libraries and so on, those who have the means, the resources, the support structures to be able to travel easily to the exam centers, they will all have an advantage over those who are relatively poor, have gone back to home villages, have gone to remote areas, have not had access to materials, will find it difficult to come in. So once again, we will stack the dice anyway if we go ahead with the exams now. So one kind of option versus another kind of option. I still think, at least to minimize the risk of a mass COVID infection amongst students, their parents or guardians who bring them, and all those, as we saw in a much smaller pool of people in Kerala.
But you know, Dr. Tharoor, we spoke to a lot of parents and they gave some practical problems, right? And I don't think we have proper solutions from the government. They said that suppose if I were to give an exam or write an exam tomorrow, and this evening suddenly the area where I stay becomes a containment zone. How do I write my exam tomorrow? Then there is another possibility which says that I live in the back of beyond. Trains are not running full capacity. How do I reach my examination center? Do you think that the government at least factor these things in rather than giving or throwing back the deadline once again? 1st of September it is.
Well, they could certainly dramatically increase the number of centers so that every district of India, including the most remote and backward, has a certified, accepted NEET-G examination.
By the way, they have.
Because
Dr. Tharoor, by the way, the latest information is they say that last year the total number of centers were 2546. This year the total centers for NEET only are 3,843, which according to them is a 50% increase. And they feel that this should suffice.
50% increase doesn't mean anything unless they've, they could simply have multiplied the number of centers in Bombay or Delhi. I mean, my question is, have they managed to create centers in those areas that you gave as an example where somebody's parents said, we live in a remote area, how do our kids get by train to an exam center? Those kinds of places. If every district has at least one center, then at least such a concern, no one will need to take a train journey to go to an exam center. I still think it's much better to do exams at home in these circumstances, but at least one in every district, including remote districts, must be done.
All right. Dr. Shashi Tharoor, many thanks for giving us certain solutions as well. Now, I don't know whether the government will consider them or not, because home examinations will get a fresh set of problems with itself. But certainly a suggestion. I hope that your political party is going to take this up. It's a big issue. Will your political party urge the government?
The students' wing of my party, the National Students' Union of India, NSUI, has been in the forefront of requesting that these examinations be postponed. So we are very, very much on the same page.
Sure. Dr. Tharoor, thank you so much for joining us on The Big Fight.
Take care.